Hello, it's Leanne Hayden here, and welcome to this week's episode. Okay, this week is another interview that got lost along the way. So this interview was back in the beginning of 2021 with Vonnie Holly, also known as Crohn's Mummy, on Instagram. So I wanted to make sure that I brought this one to you as well. We have such a great conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So stay tuned.
Be strong.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's The Beautiful Bag podcast. I have a gorgeous guest all the way from across the pond, as they say over in England. She's from across the pond, Yvonne Holly. She also goes by Crohn's Mummy on Instagram. And like I always say, we seem to have found an ostomy community over on Instagram. So aside from podcasts and things like that, make sure you're over into Instagram and checking everyone out. So Yvonne, welcome to the show this week.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I love it. And I love your accent. So I'm going to have you do all the talking.
I love your accent.
Thank you. All right. So basically, your story, I mean, you've had Crohn's since 2001. And then you ended up in a colostomy in 2010, and then it ended up being permanent 6 years later in 2016. So why don't we talk a little bit about, your journey, your story?
Okay, so I can remember I was about 11 years old, and that was when I first started getting symptoms. The weight just dropped off of me. I was absolutely tiny. Anything I ate, put into my body, it would just go straight through me. So Mum kept taking me to the doctors, and back then, 2001, they really didn't have a clue. They really did not know what was wrong with me. A couple of doctors actually said to my mum she could have some kind of eating disorder. How do you know she's going for, because I said to my mum, it's diarrhea constantly. They said, how do you know she's got diarrhea? Is she being sick? Blah, blah, blah. And then my mum was like, no, I know my daughter, she's poorly, blah, blah, blah. And then it was about a month later, I got rushed into hospital, and then they realised then how poorly I was. I was losing blood. I had no iron, no potassium. I was very malnourished, and yes, they couldn't look after me. I was too poorly for the hospital where I live, and so I had to go to a big city hospital, and that was where they diagnosed me. They went in with the cameras, so they couldn't get very far because I was so inflamed, and they diagnosed me with Crohn's colitis, which is a rare type of Crohn's disease. And then that was it. Then all the biological drugs started. So first of all, the high dose of steroids didn't do nothing except from puff me out. And then it was the biological drugs like methotrexate, anti-TNF, which is now known as Humira and Dalimab and Sterila and things like that now. I was put on every drug going. And then they did manage to get me under control for a bit with the drug called methotrexate and azathioprine and Humira, which is a very big lot of combination of drugs. And I did manage to go back to school for 15 and 16. I had a year out of school in year 8, and I missed a lot of school before that. And then I managed to do college for a year, and then on all my biological drugs. And then there was loads of hospital stays as well in between. When you got Crohn's disease, you constantly needing to go in for iron infusions and in pain and you get an infection and things like that. So anyway, I did college, and then when I was about 17, I had this almighty pain in my bum, and I said to my mum, something wrong with my bum. And she said, what do you mean? I said, there's something wrong. I said, and it sounds silly, but I feel like I've got a ball in there and it's trying to escape. And that was the only way I could describe it. And I went to hospital and had a lot of people look at me. And I'll always thank this doctor. It was actually an F1 doctor. And I think he had all this medical like notes fresh in his mind that day because he was such a new doctor. He said, it sounds like some kind of abscess trying to burst from your bum. And then he looked at my notes and realised the severity of my Crohn's disease and realised how poor it was. And then he did an MRI and I had this perianal horseshoe abscess going around my bum. And then that was it. Then I remember I was put on a lot of like antibiotics like metronidazole. I was taken to theatre to have this abscess removed. I woke up and the surgeon said, okay, this abscess, I've never seen one like it before. And this abscess was so bad that I had to live with this abscess for 9 years. And the reason why I lived with this abscess for 9 years, so basically I lived with it for 17, 18, 19, 20. I lived with it for 3 years. Then I got the colostomy bag fitted because every time they were operating on the abscess, and every time I was going to the toilet, you can imagine the infection. Yeah. It was awful. The poo was leaking into the abscess. It was so painful. So I got the colostomy bag. What happened when I got the colostomy bag was I actually got sepsis from the infection in the abscess in my bum. And I'll come to the point in a minute why I kept the abscess in my bum. Because a lot of people say, well, why did you keep it? Why don't you just get rid of it? Why didn't you have your bum removed? Anyway, so I had the colostomy bag fitted to because of the sepsis. It was life-threatening and emergency. And obviously the colostomy bag was there, but the abscess was just awful. It was horrible, but the colostomy bag helped my Crohn's and my bowel a lot. And they removed quite a lot of bowel when they went inside as well. So the reason why I kept my perianal horseshoe abscess and bum after I had my colostomy bag fitted was because my surgeon told me that where my perianal horseshoe abscess was, it would cause me complications and would stop me from having children if I had it removed. He said that we could get you to have children through living with this perianal abscess and your severity of Crohn's. But there'll be a lot of hospital stays, but we can do this if you want to have children. And I didn't even know if I could have children because of all the biological drugs and things that I was on. So I thought, right, if I'm going to try now, even though I was at my illest. But like he said, I was young as well, so it was the best time to try. And I really thought, I don't think I'm going to be able to have children. But no, I got pregnant within about a month of him saying to get pregnant. And my first pregnancy actually was absolutely incredible. Sent my Crohn's somewhat into remission. So before I got pregnant, I was having an operation on my perianal abscess every 2 to 3 months, having it drained, having new setons put in. And setons, if anybody doesn't know what they are, they're like straws that come out of your bum that attach to the abscess and let the abscess drain out. So yeah, I got pregnant and I felt great and I was monitored and looked after so well. They were absolutely incredible. I could never fault. We've got something called the NHS over here, and yeah, they're absolutely incredible. I'm sure you've heard of them. And they did everything to make sure me and my baby were safe. They did a scan every 2 weeks whilst I was pregnant. So I was reassured and they were reassured. I went the whole 39 weeks and then I had to have a C-section because of the perianal abscess. I had the C-section 39 weeks. I had a little girl, her name's Autumn, she's now 7, and there was never no complication. There was no complications with the colostomy. As my belly grew, my colostomy bag grew, like the stoma grew, sorry, not the colostomy bag. You know what I mean? The stoma just adapted with my belly. Yeah, and yeah, I loved being pregnant. And obviously, so I had her, and then my surgeon, like a year later, was like, look, if you want to have any more children, it needs to be done now. So it was never something I could plan. It was something that me, my husband and my surgeon had to plan having a baby. So like the ordinary couple, husband and wife, when should we have the baby? When should we try? When's the right time for us? It was my surgeon telling me and my husband what to do. You know, but I was thankful for that, because without him, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So so I got pregnant with my second child, and it all started off the same again. Like, I felt great. I had like a burst of energy, and I was like, oh, it's going to go smooth like the first pregnancy. And to be completely honest with you, it did go well. I got to about 30 weeks pregnant, and you know, with Crohn's disease, when you just know, you like feel like I am going to have a flare. You get those days and you can just feel it coming, the pain in my bowels, the diarrhea coming out my colostomy bag, and it was like, no, just think you've eaten something bad, it's not going to be a flare. But no, it was a flare. My little girl stopped growing inside of me, and they obviously were doing a scan like every 2 weeks, like they did with my first pregnancy, and they said, look, Yvonne, she's not growing anymore. I had what you call a bit of bowel obstruction. So and they said that, I mean, I've had bowel obstruction not being pregnant, and I had it being pregnant, and doesn't mean it's going to happen to someone that's pregnant. It didn't happen to me the first time. It's just one of those things. I also had 2 operations when I was pregnant with Felicity, at the beginning and halfway through, because of the abscess. And I forgot to mention, I did have 2 with Autumn as well, but that was good considering being 9 months pregnant with Autumn. With Felicity, decided to get her out at 34 weeks, but she stopped growing around about 30 to 32 weeks. They said she would come out, even though she would come out normally, a 34-week-old baby would come out pretty much fine. She didn't come out developed, so her lungs hadn't developed properly, but she come out, first of all, she came out screaming. So I was like, there's nothing wrong with her lungs. So I was like, wow, that's good. Amazing. Yeah, she's fine. And they said, oh, she weighs 5 pounds. And I was just like, wow, that's incredible. But then all of a sudden she stopped breathing, and the next 3 weeks were the worst 3 weeks of my life. I mean, I've been through a lot with my Crohn's disease, sepsis, you know, a lot of bad times, and seeing my baby go through that. So basically she couldn't breathe for herself, so she was put on a ventilator, but she got better. She at the intensive care team were absolutely incredible. Also as well, when they got her out, they did bowel surgery on me, so you can imagine, they got her out, she stopped breathing, they ran away with her, they did bowel surgery on me, they sewed me back up, took me back to my room, and my baby was gone. And I just wanted to get to her, and I couldn't, because I had a spinal block. I was numb, and I said to my husband, we need to get to her. And they were like, no, it's best you don't go to her, you've had a lot. I said, you can't argue with me, I've had over 50 surgeries, you can get me to her now, please. So they wheeled me down there, and it was the most hardest thing I've ever had to see in my life. But she was absolutely tiny, and she had so many wires and needles and cannulas in her. And I looked at her, and I just, you know, I just broke down, and I was like, this is my fault. And then I was like, no, it's not my fault. And everyone around me was like, don't be silly, you know, it's not your fault. And then, but it was so hard, because I knew I took the risk of, when I was going to get pregnant, that you know, there are complications, but I took the risk, and then I just felt bad. But then she got better, and she got better each day. They didn't feed her for like 4 days because she was so poorly. And I kept saying, why haven't you fed her, given her anything like a feeding tube? And they said, because she's so poorly, she's fighting for her life. She needs to fight for her life before she learns to feed. And for someone to say that to me, that really made me realise how poorly she was. But yeah, she got better. And then I managed to express my breast milk, and I was allowed to use my breast milk, even though I was having morphine and tramadol for the pain relief for my bowel surgery and my C-section, the surgeons, obviously everyone's different, but the surgeons over here in the UK say it's absolutely fine. So she had my breastfeed milk through the feeding tube, and every day she got better and better and better, and we were home within a month. And now she's 5 years old, and she is the most cutest and the most sweetest little funny cheeky monkey, and you would have never known, but she is the most strongest little girl I know. She's stronger than me, and everyone always says she's strong like her mummy, but she's definitely stronger than me. She's absolutely fine. She just had a rough start in life, and we are so lucky that we live in the world that we live in now, and they can do things like this, because if we didn't, she wouldn't be here today, and nor would I, so nor would none of my children. If I didn't have my colostomy bag, my children wouldn't be here. And then after that, my story with my Crohn's comes pretty much to an end, because we had the bum removed. We were like, I actually got rushed in with sepsis again, and it was very scary. And that obviously Felicity was still very small, and I can remember I was in the hospital and I was very delirious, but I can remember my surgeon saying, we'll do it now, Yvonne, we'll do it now. And I just remember signing and saying, take it all away, get rid of it all. I don't care if I have a hysterectomy. I don't care if I don't I've done it now. My little girl was fighting for her life. I know I can't have any more children now, because I just have to go through that again. So I was like, just take it all away. It doesn't matter to me no more. And they did. They took the whole of my bum, the whole of my abscess. My reproductive system has fallen down, but I don't care, and I can't have children no more. But yeah, I'm now under a gynecologist, and he goes in and checks on me every 3 years, because my cervix is in my bum. So he goes in and does a smear test, and I have to be put asleep for a simple procedure, just because my cervix is now in my bum. But I don't care. It naturally fell down there, and so my uterus is tilted, and my reproductive system has naturally fallen. But it's okay to be left how it's left, because I'm okay. I feel okay. I do have a few complications. I'm going through perimenopause, which I found out a year ago. When I had my bum removed, when I had the sepsis, which was 4 years ago, they did not know, but I later developed temporal lobe epilepsy, which I've just been diagnosed with August 2020. So they did a lot of research into it, because they could I have what you call post-sepsis syndrome, so it's affected a lot of my organs, and they looked into it, and they did like an EEG, and it came up on the scan that it was caused by infection, sepsis, and obviously that's what I had. And and the long-term 9 years of the infection in my bum. But I am still here, and the way I look at it is, I now have epilepsy, and I now have to take a lot of medication every day, and I do have a lot of seizures, but they've just got them under control. But I'd rather have that than not be here. I've got to look at it like I could have had sepsis and died and not been here for my children and my family. But I had sepsis, I survived, and I just have to live with epilepsy for the rest of my life now in result of that, because it starved the oxygen from my brain for a moment. But we didn't know that at the time. We thought it just went to my organs, abdominal, lungs and heart, liver and things. But now we know, after a lot of investigating and tests, that it did happen through sepsis. But so here I am. I think that's pretty much my story. There's a lot. There's probably about 100 and a million things that I've missed out. But there's kind of a sum up of me.
Oh, you have been through so much.
Yeah.
And in not a long time, like in not a very long time, in a short time. But like you said, you're here, you're alive, you know, your ostomy saved you. It gave you the ability to be a mom. You've got two beautiful little girls who I love seeing you post about. They're just so adorable. And you get to be a mom, and you get to live your life, you know? How has life been living in an ostomy, like your day-to-day ostomy life?
Amazing. Ever since I've had my colostomy, I've never looked back. I wish when I was diagnosed in 2001, I wish they just did it then. but then I don't also wish that they did it then, because my life might not have turned out the way it turned out now. So I think they tried all the biological drugs, they tried all they could, you know, because I was so young. So yeah, I'm happy with what happened actually, because it's got me to where I am today and the experience and things. But yeah, my colostomy bag, I love it just as much as I love my children. I do. It's just the same. It just makes my life 10 times easier. And my children, I educate my children. I said, do you know, we wouldn't be able to, you know, when we go out for days out before COVID, like I said, we wouldn't be able to eat this meal right now if it wasn't for my bag, or mummy wouldn't be able to do this with you right now, or walk to the park, or without worrying about where the toilet is. But now mummy can just do what she wants, walking along, pooing, and they just think it's great. You know, we have a laugh and a joke about it. And yeah, an ostomy bag's brilliant. I mean, if anyone ever needed one, so what? It's part of you, and it's made my life so much better. It's given me a life back. So yeah,
I love that. And you know, I have to thank you for sharing your story and being so vulnerable and open with everyone today. I know you're gonna you change people's lives just from seeing you on social media, and I know you're gonna change people's lives who listen to this as well. If there was one last thing that you would want to leave everyone with, what would that be?
You can always be scared, but just remember that you can always find the positivity in anything out there, and that, you know, there's always someone in the world. I always think there's always somebody else in the world worse off. Just remember where you are, what you're doing, how much you've, you know, all the surgeries you've been through. If you have to have a bag, it doesn't matter if you're having bad mental health because of your illness. Reach out to someone, tell them it's okay. Just be yourself. Reach out to anybody on Instagram, me. Don't suffer in silence. Never, ever, ever suffer in silence. Always talk about your illness. If you talk about your illness and just release it off you, it can do wonderful things to your brain. And I think that's why I've coped so well and never been mentally affected, because I've just talked and talked and talked to everybody I know about my illness, and they've understood. My friends, my family have grew up with me and understood everything about my illness. Yeah, just talk about your illness, because it gets you a long way in life. Just talking about it, being open about it. I'm sure you would agree.
I would totally agree. So, you know, Yvonne, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, you're so welcome. Lovely to meet you as well.
These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers.